So seizing the white space is really about trying to leverage new opportunities, new places that require where the company has to change their business model to succeed. And what I mean by that is they have to develop a new value proposition, a new way of capturing profit. They have to change the operating model, the profit formula, all these things that affect really the structure of business. I think so often we talk about opportunities as, you got to go into an adjacent space where you don't want to go too far past the core, because if we go beyond the core, you're in risky territory where you don't really know what you're doing. But a lot of the opportunities that leverage new technology or that need to transform an industry are lucrative and exciting opportunities, but in order to achieve those opportunities, you may have to change the business model. And I think if we have a framework for how we think about a business model, how you manage a business model, a process for how you build one, then we can seize opportunities, what I call white space opportunities, that are beyond an adjacency or something that's close to what you normally do, and we can have more predictable discipline in doing that. How does a company create, capture, and deliver value? So that's the essence of what a business model is in the first place. If we can understand the basics, the underpinnings of business, then we can venture off into new areas where there's opportunity and be more successful at it. The 4 box is really a representation of value creation, capture, and delivery. There's a customer value proposition which defines how an important unmet job is going to be addressed by a company through an offering, both what they're going to sell and how they're going to sell it, product and service, and the means by which they sell it in terms of the channel and the payment scheme and all those kinds of things. And if you have an important job that's well addressed by the offering at a reasonable price, you have a powerful value proposition. So that's the first box. The second box is profit formula, which is the means by which a company captures value for itself. And the profit formula is a way that a company repeatably determines how it's going to make money. So it's going to have a margin structure. It's got a margin. It's going to have a margin target. That's going to be based on a cost structure. There's going to be a certain amount of inventory that gets turned through the system each year. Sort of a volume amount. And that formula is a description from a financial perspective of how the company achieves its profit as a whole. So it has to be well determined as a profit formula. And then the third is the delivery model, the operating model, and that consists of what makes up the structure of an organization at a fundamental level. It consists of resources and processes, and they come together in the right proprietary way to repeatably deliver on the value for the customer and capture value for itself. I think they stumble in 3 areas. One, I think exactly right, is around the profitability side, that especially when it comes to cost structure, overhead, fixed costs, all those things are considered fixed. And companies look at new opportunities in the context of their existing cost structure, especially on the overhead side. So that's usually the hardest for companies to get their arms around, that they would change. The second that's challenging for companies is the rate at which a company generates business. So the volume, if you're a sort of a high volume, high scale business going to something that's low volume, lower scale, less economies of scale, or vice versa, is very difficult. There's infrastructure that's in place. So thinking, that you're going to make money, by lower margins and higher volume, if that's not the way you think, it's very difficult to change. The third, I guess there are 4 parts that are hard. So those are the 2 pieces of the profit formula that are difficult. On the operating model, it's difficult to change a lot of those pieces together because they're systemic in nature. I mean, it's one thing to say, we're going to bring in a new resource, or we're going to refine a manufacturing process, but when we have to organize those activities, that center around why we have resources and processes in the first place, and do things in a whole different way to deliver on a new customer value proposition, it's very hard for companies to systemically change that for obvious reasons, because they have legacy, that's been laid out in a certain way of doing business for a very long time. Those processes get honed and refined. It's difficult to change them. And then the final piece are what overlays a business model. It's the rules, norms, and metrics that guide the the procedures, the rules that are in place, so that people will adhere to a certain way of doing business that protects the underlying business model. It's because you got to begin with where you sit. Where are we in the first place? Because without that, how can we know whether what we're pursuing as a new opportunity is really that different than the existing business model? Because what we don't want to do is just create a new business model to create a new business model. We want to have an understanding, is this new opportunity something that leverages the core in a real way of which we could keep in-house? Or is it really a fundamentally different way of turning a profit and operating, by which we need to manage it totally different? And without having the baseline understanding of what our existing business is, it's going to be very difficult to know what we're doing and how new it really is. Disruptive innovation, disruptive thinking is a strategic way of thinking. It's really about how you view an opportunity having the best potential for success in the marketplace as it relates to creating new growth. So it's really an external view. But when we find a company that gets disrupted by the disruptive opportunity, the reason for their being disrupted is that their business model is being disrupted by the attacker, by the new entrant. That the new entrant comes in with a different business model that is disruptive to the existing incumbent's business model. For example, personal computers come into the market, into the consumer market that was just forming, as a toy. And they're $4,000 machines, and they're making money on as low as 20% gross margins. The mini computer manufacturers are selling $500,000 mini computer machines and making 60% gross margins. So the personal computer manufacturers were able to ultimately disrupt the mini computers and encroach on the corporate computing market, because the mini computer manufacturers could not prioritize personal computers, because their business model, from just a pure financial perspective, could not prioritize making these low-priced machines on much lower margins. So the reason for the disruption is the business model innovation. And so that's where we need to have an understanding of a business model and how it works to be able to be successful in creating disruptive opportunities. So if we have a strategy for disruption, and then we say, well, what is the right way we need to organize and turn a profit in order to succeed in that disruptive strategy, then we've linked disruptive innovation with business model innovation. New growth going into the white space is risky by definition. Now, the way we mitigate the risk is by starting small and being in a foothold market where you can test and learn in a transaction-based way. The problem is, by mitigating the risk that way, you all of a sudden make the effort seem very tiny and inconsequential. And so therefore, it's not interesting to the overall core business and its objectives to, get growth. And so therefore, you end up with this inherent conflict. And back to expectation setting, there is the inappropriate expectations that are often set on new growth businesses to be delivering much sooner than is realistic if you want to manage this risk profile and allow the entrepreneur within the existing company to do the right thing. And the right thing is really to be disciplined on learning and to develop the business and to be constantly saying, this isn't a free ride. The objective here is to create substantial growth because after all you're in a corporation, but it isn't going to probably get realized for 5, 6, 7 years down the road. And we're going to always be testing to make sure we're moving in the right trajectory so that we're going to get that significant growth down the road. There's really 3 phases to this whole point of time and execution. The first phase is incubation. And incubation is really about testing and learning, trying to convert assumptions to knowledge. And that phase can take as much as 3 years in and of itself, 3, 4 years max, I would say. Hopefully by 4 years you've incubated this enough to have really learned what you need to learn. It could take as little as a year and as long as 3 years, I would say.
Is there any profitability in there?
Oh, sure. There's lots of profitability, but it's small because you're in a foothold market. So it's not going to be interesting to the corporation. But the profitability is important because by being profitable as soon as possible, you've proved you've got a viable business model. You have the potential. You're not masking anything by having invested so much that you don't know whether you're profitable or not. You keep the discipline of managing resources effectively and investment as small as possible so that you can net say, we're turning a profit even if it's small. So that's what incubation is about, is primarily learning, but there are some financials around profitability and managing that. Then acceleration happens once you've understood enough of what you've set out to do in terms of assumptions turning to knowledge that you now can effectively scale the business.
So that's your implementation phase.
That's implementing to accelerate and to grow. And that can take also, 3 or 4 years, depending on, how you manage the move from a foothold to another foothold to, just how does market expansion happen. It could happen very rapidly because you really just needed that initial experiment to understand, and then the large corporation can use its access power and its brand and, its assets in general to be able to scale in the right way.
So is that the stage where it's most critical to draw from the core?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I think there can be some drawing from the core in incubation, but absolutely in scaling. The mechanism for scaling is the fact that you have an established infrastructure or at least existing resources you can draw off of. That wouldn't be the same kind of scaling that you would have if you were a startup that was if you were purely on your own. And then the last phase is transition, which says, for the long haul, what does this business look like? Does it get put in play as part of an existing division? Is it sort of separated out even from a division? It's likely to be its own business unit. But even then, you could be integrating in the right way to make sure that it's going to have the right kind of structure to last for the long haul. How do we, Company X, provide greater access and affordability to medicine, to public health care, to, I guess, private health care as well, to folks that are in China and India and places that are in third world countries. What could a business model innovation do to help provide greater access and affordability? So I think that's really exciting because it's just such an important good that can be achieved. And I think generally speaking, the ability, I think, for the United States to enable the world to improve its standard of living and its quality of life could be a great mechanism for us to address our own ills.
Reverse innovation,
Yes.
That's my new favorite buzzword.
Yeah, I think that's probably what it means, is one aspect of reverse innovation is you do it in the country and then you bring that innovation back, to the United States. And so there's one benefit. But I think in general, just as an economic engine, our ability to help the world will end up helping us because I think we can have a big part in the production of goods and services and ideas that, that we then receive the rewards, the rents for that effort.